Et jusqu'à présent, tout, là, on fait rencontre, toujours, à chaque travail, on toujours dit pas de sécurité.
So the women that are actually living in the camps consistently say there is no security.
Pas d'éclairage.
There's no lighting.
Jusqu'à présent.
Until even now.
Ça veut dire qu'il existe sécurité. Qui amélioration dit, qui amélioration dit qui côté dans ce sens.
She said, what improvement can I really speak about in this sense if those things aren't happening?
Pour moi, pour ta amélioration, il faut que quelqu'un qui parle devant juge, pour ta juger, laisse ça, l'autre qui a fait violation, il même capable, par exemple, et puis il t'a suspendu.
So in order for her to really see that there's a change, she needs to see somebody who's in a court of law, who is judged by judge, and so other people can actually see this process go through in order for it to be an effective deterrent for future cases.
Et puis nous voyons manquer un peu de juge pour tout qui peut la justice avec la question violence.
But there's also a dire lack of female judges to actually be hearing cases on sexual violence.
Dans ce sens, il faut qu'il y ait un support qui bat pour qu'il y ait en pile femme à arriver dans l'appareil justice là, laisse savoir après que peut-être que nous avons dit violer a bien chance pour arriver devant le tribunal.
We're saying this is one of the ways, if we actually provided support for more women to get to the judge level, we may have a better success rate with actually seeing these cases through.
Bataille violence en Haïti, il besoin de support.
The battle against violence in Haiti needs a lot of support.
Parce qu'avec nous tous étrangers, tout pays, parce que Haïtiens on joue quand même, il y a soulagé.
And if we can unite with people from all around the world, we may have a chance of actually getting somewhere.
Parce que son pays qui doit pas respecter là-dedans.
Because in this country, human rights are simply not respected.
Si on respecte droit moun, ça va passer là, va passer.
And if our rights, human rights, were actually respected, we would not be in this situation.
Parce qu'on révolution pour faire pour que femmes eux-mêmes capable de se voir.
We think we need a revolution in order for women to rise up and change the situation.
We have been working with KOFAVIV actually since, for many years before the earthquake, but for the past year, most of our work with KOFAVIV, as Malya was talking about, has focused on working to combat this virtual epidemic, really, of rape that has taken hold in Haiti since the earthquake. And we started last year being, I have to say, rebuffed at every single turn in our efforts to get international policymakers in particular to address the issue of sexual violence in Haiti. And tonight, as you heard in the introduction, we have in our hands this legally binding document that's a set of policy prescriptions from the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights of the OAS that really gives us in our hand the policy prescription that we need to end this epidemic. So I want to use my time to tell you sort of how we got to this point and tell you a little bit about MADRE's model of doing that kind of international advocacy in the service of and in partnership with community-based organizations, in this case with KOFAVIV. Some of you might remember that this time last year, donor states, the governments that were pledging funds to reconstruction in Haiti, were preparing to gather at the UN for this big conference where everyone was going to sort of pony up and say what they were going to give to rebuild Haiti. MADRE has worked for about 27 years with women's organizations, grassroots women's organizations, many of them in crisis settings. And so we knew after the earthquake that we were going to see a terrible rise in sexual violence in Haiti. And that's not about Haiti, that's about what happens after disasters in places where people's human rights are not addressed properly. But when the Donors Conference happened, we and KOFAVIV and many other NGOs were sort of rapping on the door from the outside, trying to get even 2 minutes in this day-long conference for some NGO civil society representation from Haiti to address that conference. And in particular, we were warning about sexual violence. And I have to say, we were flat out ignored. In the spring, when sexual violence in fact started to rise after people had been in these camps for weeks and months, we worked with KOFAVIV, as Malya was talking about, to meet the most basic urgent needs of people who had been raped. Medical care, psychosocial counseling, providing basic things like food and clothing to people who still didn't have that. And we also worked with KOFAVIV to try to get them a seat at the table at the UN body that was coordinating government and NGO and international agency activity about gender-based violence in Haiti, and their jargony term for that is the UN GBV, Gender-Based Violence Subcluster. So that was kind of, from the perspective of women in the camps, sort of the closest and most pertinent kind of governing authority in terms of who was making decisions that impacted their lives tremendously. And they were not able to be heard by that body. There were some very real concrete obstacles to that. You know, the meetings were held far away from the camps. Nobody could afford to get there. They were in a sort of a compound where you needed an ID pass to get in. Nobody in the camps had that. Even if they did have that, the meetings were in English and French so that foreigners could participate. And in our advocacy with KOFAVIV and on their behalf with the UN, when we tried to get them to commit to at least providing translation, we were told that that would be too tedious. So there were some very real obstacles to grassroots women's participation in that body and in any kind of decision making. There has been some steps forward on that, thanks to KOFAVIV and other grassroots women's groups' sort of determination on that front, and we could talk about that afterwards. But in general, sort of that's the model of this kind of advocacy, is to meet those kinds of emergency needs of people who are really on the front lines of the crisis, and at the same time be working so that those people who are most affected by the crisis can represent themselves to governing authorities and you know, other kinds of authorities that they're contending with. And we did that in Haiti, and we did that also internationally. Malya, who you got to hear from, worked with us in June to testify at the Human Rights Council in Geneva, and she was the first person that those UN representatives heard from who was talking about the issue of sexual violence after the earthquake as a first-person witness, saying, this is what happens to us, this is what happened to me, this is what I saw, and it made a tremendous difference. It really was kind of a turning point to have her there, because she was able to kind of make a human connection to those people in the room. So this wasn't this abstract issue along with a bunch of other abstract issues. It was them, and you saw how awesome she is. It was them, you know, listening to her directly, telling her story, and it really created a kind of international urgency that, for the first time, that we really needed to propel the campaign. And as we were sort of working with KOFAVIV to figure out how we were going to direct that momentum, we also scaled up our distribution of whistles in the camp, like the ones you saw in the video. Like, this is one of them, regular old gym whistle. And this is obviously a very partial, very inadequate solution to a human rights crisis. But what these whistles did, and you kind of saw it a little bit in the video, was to unleash this sort of chain reaction of empowerment among the women in the camps. I talked to a woman this month in Haiti who said that after she got her whistle from KOFAVIV and MADRE in the summer, that was 6 months after the earthquake, that was the first night that she had been able to sleep, because she finally felt like she had some way to protect herself and her daughter. And this isn't just one woman, this is hundreds of women. After she had that whistle and could sleep at night and felt some agency over what was going on, she started going to the KOFAVIV meetings. And this is hundreds of women who are doing this. And the next thing we hear, the women in the camps are holding a sit-in at the National Palace, demanding action to end rape, demanding shelter for earthquake survivors. I don't know if any of you have ever participated in a sit-in, but that is not an act of despair. You participate in a demonstration like that when you have a sense that you can affect change. And so the whistle, however many rapes this was able to prevent, because people had training about you blow the whistle 3 times to alert the community, people come when they heard the whistle, it did that, and that's great. But even more long-term, what it did was to kind of enable people in the camps to re-access some sense of having control over their own lives, being able to do something about the situation that they were in. And so when we started working on the precautionary measures, which in the fall we were very busy submitting to the Inter-American Commission, the women in the camps had this tremendous sense of empowerment about the possibility of doing that, even though we secretly knew it was a tremendous long shot. But we submitted that petition, and we did that as part of a coalition of other advocacy organizations. To me, the most important thing about the precautionary measures petition is that we crafted those measures by going to the women in the camps and asking them, what do you need to feel safe? Because they know, people who are living in a human rights crisis invariably know what it is that they need. They just don't have access to power. And we wrote that petition in response to, essentially to that question. And in December, when the Commission granted those precautionary measures, they were a perfect reflection of what women in the camp said that they wanted and they needed as policies to end this epidemic of rape. And those were, taking care of survivors, medical, psychosocial support, lighting and security in the camps they said they needed. They said they wanted training for public officials so that officials would understand rape to be the serious crime that it is. They said they wanted an end to barriers to investigations and prosecutions of rape. And the most important thing that they said they wanted, again, was a seat at the table. They wanted participation, mandated participation of grassroots women's organizations in planning and policy making to combat gender-based violence in Haiti. So, and those were the measures that the Commission prescribed. It was, for us and for KOFAVIV and for the other organizations involved, sort of a moment to celebrate. But that's really all it is, because what we have now, is this document that says this is what the government of Haiti needs to do. And our campaign moving forward, of course, is to actually get the government to do that. That's actually the much harder part. And it's not always the part that lawyers stick around for. But it's very, very crucial to understand that, getting that decision by the Commission, however unprecedented parts of it may be, and that's great, is, not that meaningful to all of those women in the camps until the lights are up and functioning and until the public officials are trained and the police is there and all the rest of it. So I'll end there. There's a lot more to talk about, including sort of our campaign for actually doing the implementation, which I'd be happy to tell people about in particular, because we're going to need everyone's help to get this done. But that's our work moving forward. So, thanks.